I put an agenda on your table, and what I thought I'd do, I just have an hour, and I broke it down into 3 subjects. And I thought I'd talk a few minutes on each subject, and then open it up to questions, and then move on to the next subject. But I'm not sure the order's right. The last time I visited with you folks, we spent pretty much the whole time on reasonable accommodation assistance animals, and I had to leave, and I wasn't sure that we were quite done with that. So I'm asking now, should I go through this order, or do you want me to start with assistance animals? Assistance animals. All right, that's where I'll start then. Now, you folks are all in the housing industry. So you're concerned about the Fair Housing Act, Title VIII, the Iowa Civil Rights Act. When it comes to assistance animals, that's the law you folks are concerned about. Now let me do this. There's 2 big laws out there that talk about animals. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's a big law, and it covers what's called public accommodations. Menards, McDonald's, restaurants, gas stations. It also covers your rental office. If you have your own rental office, you know, where you have a person there and people come in and make applications, ask about the apartments, ask about the vacancies. So the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, covers those public accommodations, Menards, McDonald's, and your rental office, just your rental office. That's the ADA. Now, the Fair Housing Act, Title VIII, and the Iowa Civil Rights Act, when it comes to housing, that's talking about your units, your dwelling units, housing. That's clear, right? We've got the ADA, we've got Title VIII, and the Iowa Civil Rights Act. Now, under the ADA, service animal is defined. The ADA and US DOJ rules say a service animal is pretty much either a small horse or a dog. Let's just say a dog. Pretty much it's a dog. But the dog has to be individually trained by the master, by some certifying agency. It has to be trained, and it has to be trained to do tasks, to do work. That's a service animal under the ADA. Now, under the ADA, it doesn't cover therapeutic companion therapy animals. That's not the ADA. So if I have a disability, and let's say that I have an animal, a dog, that my doctor thinks is an emotional support animal, a companion animal. I have this dog. I have this disability. I have this assistance animal that provides companionship support I need for my disability. I can't take that dog into Menards. I can't take that into McDonald's. I once went to Menards one time. I had my 3 little grandchildren, couple 2, 1 4. And I'm into Menards, and I see this guy pushing a cart, an empty cart. And he's got a ferret in the cart. And the ferret's jumping all around, you know, and I just look at him, and I look at him funny, and he says, "It's a ferret." I said, "I know it's a ferret." And then he says, "I have a right to have it here. It's an emotional support animal. I can bring it in here." I didn't argue with him. I just thought to myself, you have no right to have that dog in here. That ferret, I mean.
You didn't feel an obligation to save him?
No, I didn't. Now, so here's the point then. Under the ADA, the animal has to be trained to do tasks. Maybe I have a seizure disorder, and maybe my dog is trained to sense when that aura, when that aura of my seizure is coming on, and the dog is close to me, provides support, alerts me. That's a task. That animal is trained to do that. That's the kind of animal under the ADA you can bring into McDonald's. Now, under fair housing law, the animal can be that. It can be a service animal. It can also be a therapy, a support, companion animal. So, if I apply for a unit at your place and we talk about all the stuff and I like it and I look at it and I'm happy with it, and then I mention to you that I do have a disability and I have need for an assistance animal. If I do indeed have a disability under the law, an impairment which substantially limits a major life activity, and I do really have a need for this animal, that this animal provides the emotional support, it's connected to my disability, it helps ameliorate the symptoms of my disability, I need this animal. I do better, lots better in your apartment. I can fully enjoy and use your apartment with this animal with me. Then you're probably going to have to make a reasonable accommodation and modify your no pets policy to allow me to bring my animal with me. So the kind of animal that I can bring with me to your unit can be, it's called an assistance animal, which is a big umbrella term. It includes the service animals, and it includes the companion and the therapy support animals. Okay, I'm going to stop right there until we have questions. Yes?
So if someone says they have need for an assistance animal, do they also have to be declared that they have a disability?
Yes.
ADA?
Yes. Well, yes, because the definition of disability in the Fair Housing Law is the same as the definition in the ADA. It has to be an impairment, physical or mental, that substantially limits a major life activity, working, breathing, walking, talking.
So do they have to bring that paper or whatever it is? Or do they just tell you? Or how do they document that?
Let's say you have a vacant unit. You post it on Craigslist, and I give you a call. Is your unit still available? Yes, it is. And we talk about the unit. And then you ask me, how many in your household? And I say, it's just going to be me, but I do have an assistance animal, or I do have a service animal. You might say, well, we have a no pets policy. And I'm going to say, well, it's not a pet. I have a disability. It's a service animal. It's an assistance animal. The doc says I need it. Your reaction at that point is, you don't know me from Adam. You don't know if I really do have a disability. You don't really know if this dog is really an assistance animal. Could be just a pet. You don't know how safe that animal is, what kind of history I have with the animal. I rented from this couple 3 or 4 years ago, caused all kinds of damage. You don't know any of that. All you know is that I'm declaring I have a disability and need for an accommodation. I need you to waive your no pets policy. At that point, Cheryl, you can say, Don, I don't know you from Adam. I'm going to need a statement. I mean, that's fine. You can make application. And I know I'm obligated to make reasonable accommodation. But I need some info to verify the fact that you have a disability. And I need to verify what this animal does for you. So what you can do, Cheryl, is you can ask me to provide a statement from my health care provider that verifies the fact that I have a disability under the law, and 2, that gives you an explanation as to how I use this animal, why I need this animal at this place. So then you say, okay, when you make the application, and if you want me to waive this policy, give me that doctor's statement. Give me a chance to review it and consider it, because that's what I'm obligated to do. When I make a request for an accommodation to you, you don't have to just say yay or nay right away. You can say, I will consider that. I know what the law is, but I need that statement so I can make my decision. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Yes?
What does that statement have to look like?
Well, you want to be sure that it's from a health care provider. Could be from a social worker, could be from a doc, could be
But
from
more
a...
of like a written...
Yeah.
Not a prescription.
Well, the prescription might not have all the info that you need. You need to verify that it's a healthcare provider. Lots of times the prescription will have the letterhead at the top, the address, the phone number. and it'll be signed by a Dr. Vanderveer, who's an MD. Maybe it says that, but it depends on what the script says. I mean, you need the doc to verify the person has a disability. The script don't always do that. And you need the statement that says, tell me a little bit about this dog. You don't have to give me lots of specifics, but I just need some indication from you, doc, that this person needs this dog in order to live in my unit, in order to fully use and enjoy my unit. So you get this script from your tenant, and it doesn't have those 2 bits of info. It doesn't satisfy you. You simply say, thank you for the script, but you know what? I need a little bit more info. Could you get me the additional info, and then I'll get back to you in a very timely manner. Yes?
I had an incident this summer where she said she had a child that needed a dog. So I said, bring me the letter. And she said, well, to be really honest with you, the dog has died. So she said, we now have a cat.
So she wants a dead dog?
No.
Oh.
We now have a cat. I did not have a letter saying the boy needed the cat.
What did the letter on the dog say?
That this young man who was like 8 or 10 years old, that he needed this dog. He gets hyper every so often, and so she says he takes him in the room and it calms him down.
Did the doc say in the letter that he had seen the boy interact with the dog?
No. But the problem was that there was no dog. The dog was dead. She wanted to bring a cat instead of a dog.
Okay, make sure I understand, because it's early. So even though she brings you this letter, at the time she gave you the letter, she had no dog. But the letter said she needs this dog for the boy.
Right.
And then she said, here's the letter, but I don't have a dog no more, but I want to get a cat.
Oh, I have a cat.
I have a cat. Yeah, I don't think you'd be so unreal. I mean, not all animals are the same, are they? I mean, a dog does something for me that a cat, I mean, I'd kill the cat probably. Now, don't, I'm just joking. So I don't know if it's the same thing. So I don't know that it would be unreasonable. I don't think it would be unreasonable for you to say, well, you know what, this has to do with a dog. Go back to your doc. I need something that verifies that that your son has this disability and that he has a need for this cat. I don't know that that's unreasonable. I think I would do that if I were because you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. You're going to let her have the cat in, and then Jeannie's going to come to you and say, I want a cat, you know. And although she doesn't have a disability, she has no need for the cat because of a disability. She has no disability, and she's not protected under the law. She could never file a complaint with us. But she could make your life miserable by saying to you, how come you let him and not me? You don't want to address that. So you probably want to cover your butt a little bit by just making sure you cross your T's. And yes, sir.
Don, in the situation with a service dog, everything's legit. Dog poops in the hallway, its master doesn't clean it up. Give him a 7-day notice to cure the fault. You go through a 2 weeks later, it happens again. Is there any problem with getting rid of the tenant with the dog?
So long as you're consistent. Tommy has an animal and had an animal. Well, hold it now. Do you have let me back up. Your building is no pets. Okay, so the comps, there's not going to be Tom with some other animal in the building. So I've just got this one person with a disability who has need for this assistance animal, who allowed the animal to poop in the hall and didn't clean it up, right? So I can't compare that, I'm talking about as an ICRC investigator now. What I would generally do is I would look to see if I could find other people without disabilities who have animals, who had their animals poop in the hall and you didn't do anything to them. But I don't have those comps. So I'm focused just on this one guy with this assistance animal who pooped in the hall. So what I would do is I would look at your other tenants then who've caused similar damages through negligence. Maybe Tom had a brother or a grandson come over and playing baseball broke some windows and negligent, and you didn't go after Tom. But now you're going after a poop pile in the hall. And Tom doesn't have a disability. So
there's a big difference between a broken window and a poop in the
I'm not going to argue with you about that, because what I would say then, I would go back to David and say, you know what, I found Tom, his grandson broke a window, you didn't go after him, but you went after my complainant, not my complainant, but the person who filed the complaint, because she left poop in the hall. And I would ask David, how come the different treatment? And then David could say, poop much worse. And here's why. So he'd get a chance to explain.
We had a seeing eye dog one time, and he says, well, I can't see the poop to pick it up. And we were like, well, you must find somebody to pick it up for you then. So we ended up making arrangements. We paid the maintenance man a whole bunch of months to pick up the dog poop.
Oh.
And then when he moved out, he was like, well, you know, it was like, well, there's dog pieces and you're on the carpet. You got to pay for this. Well, that was out of my control. I didn't realize it was there. And we had an investigator came in and we won because he should not have allowed that to happen. So.
That's exactly right. You handled it just perfectly, I think. Yeah. That's perfect. Yes?
I have another question. You had, in your description of this, you said, when you were talking about the person with the dog, you said, 3 or 4 years ago, he'd been in somebody else's apartment, had done some.
Oh, yeah, good.
I want you to, so if someone comes and wants to rent, and then you look back and see that, then what can you say at that point?
Well, just like that woman said, if I bring an assistance animal in, and you're okay with it because you've got the documentation. I know I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
I got to answer one thing and then go to it.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a good transition here.
Oh, okay.
Now, if I remember it, I think I've got it. I get to bring my animal in, but I'm responsible for the damage the animal does. I can't ask you to overlook the poop in the hall. I can't ask you to overlook the damage to the carpet, the scratching on the doors. I mean, you can come after me for that. I know it's hard to come after me because I got no money, but you can come after me for that. Or you can hurt me if I ever apply for another apartment by the reference that you give. Now, see how the transition goes? So, in your normal course of events now, you got to be consistent. I mean, I've investigated cases, we've investigated cases where Gary here doesn't do background checks. Doesn't do them. His units are so run down, he could care less. If I show up as the prospective tenant with my $500 for the first month's rent, I'm good as gold, and he takes me in. Now, if that's his policy and practice, when Brian comes in to apply, and Brian has need for an assistance animal, and all of a sudden Gary now does this highfalutin background check, then there's a problem. Because why is he doing this highfalutin background check? Because of his disability? Because of his need for an assistance animal? Maybe. Now, back to your question. See the segue then? So you do background checks. You insist on at least one, the most recent landlord reference. And so you call Paula. And you say, you go through the regular stuff. Hopefully you can talk to each other and you don't have to go through these forms and stuff. But however you do it, you find out from Paula that Rex had the same animal, a German Shepherd, 45-pound, with a big white spot between its eyes, at her place. And she had tons of problems with him and the animal. There was barking all night. She gave him notices to get the barking down. It was just not a very good assistance animal. It just bothered other tenants, disrupted everybody, and that was the primary reason she decided not to renew his lease. Now that gives you're not turning him down now. I mean, as long as you're consistent, and if you would have got the same reference on somebody else and turned him down, that's not disability. That's not because he needs an animal.
Are you implying by that explanation, sir,
That Gary's a bad landlord? Yes, I am.
That you have not had.
No, never.
do we have to do in effect, a standardized background check on everyone?
No, it's up to you what you do.
No, wait a minute. I just want to clarify for sure. I go through a full background check, and I do allow animals for a fee. And I am particularly offended by this crap right here because of how easy it is for people to manipulate you. So what am I potentially going to encounter when I get somebody that I have excluded based upon other things? As an example, they may have inferior credit, they may have other issues that I use on everybody else. But this one is their claim is I eliminated them because of the companion animal, which is going to be my objective. If I can't have control of it in any way, in a similar way, because animals clearly do damage, clearly intensify fair wear and tear, and then if I have a tenant who won't take care of their responsibility, in other words, picking up the BM and all the problems that go with it, then I don't want those people. So I'm saying, am I going to be potentially penalized because of not doing a common check on everybody that comes with an animal?
What do you mean penalized?
When it comes to when I'm charged,
Oh, we're going to take the complaint.
Exactly.
We're going to take the complaint, whether you're guilty or innocent, because we don't know. We're going to take the complaint, and we're going to investigate the complaint, and we're going to be, as talking about commission staff, we're going to be as objective, as neutral, as impartial as we can be when we interview the complainant, when we interview you, when we review tenant files, when we interview other tenants. I mean, we're going to do a thorough and fair investigation. We're going to get to the bottom of it. And if we find that you did not discriminate, we're going to recommend that finding to the administrative law judge, and the judge is going to find no probable cause. I can't guarantee that you won't get a complaint filed against you.
Well, we all know that.
Yes.
We came in a little late to the class, sorry. Did you guys talk
Yes, we
about
did. Covered all that.
the difference between the service and companion animals?
Yes, we did. We, honest to God, we did, didn't we?
I just want to, do we have to accept a companion animal? Is that considered under the law now?
Are you McDonald's?
No.
Well, then you don't. If you're McDonald's, you don't.
Okay, we don't.
Are you a housing provider?
Yes.
Then you do.
Okay. Because I know it was kind of iffy.
How'd I do on that? That was pretty good, wasn't it? Because everybody else in this room now knows the difference
Okay.
between the ADA and the fair housing law. And you know what, too? We have a...
It says no, and fair housing has.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Yes. We have a very good law review article that's on our website. A bunch of students from the University of Iowa did it 5-6 years ago. And it's called, you can find it there, it's hard to find, but you can find it, get to publications, get to fair housing studies. It's called a comparative study, where these law students distinguish the ADA animal from the fair housing animal.
Okay.
And in that article, too, it talks about pet deposit, pet fees.
Yeah, which you don't charge.
Yeah, let's talk about that now. Is that okay? Now remember under the fair housing laws, this whole thing about assistance animals all comes under this substantive section that says housing providers must make reasonable accommodation, which means they must adjust their policies, practices for persons with disabilities who need that accommodation, that waiver. Now, two big things there. Big cases, subjects, lots of cases. Parking. We haven't had a lot in the last 3 or 4 months, but for a year or two we had almost every month 3 or 4 parking cases where a tenant who has a mobility impairment needs a spot closer to their door, their unit. So they come to you and say, I have a disability, I have the DOT placard, I'd like to get a spot just for me, or I'd like for you to install another designated spot. Well, your policy is first come, first serve. You know, I can't give you a spot. If I give you a spot, I have to give Paula a spot. I just don't do that. Well, I understand that. I'm the tenant now, but I have a disability, I have a placard, I have a mobility impairment. I can show that, I can prove that to you. I need you to adjust your policy. Make an exception in your policy for me. And the law says you have to do that unless you can show it would cause an undue hardship. The cost is too great. The inconvenience, the administrative cost, too great, I can't do it. Now, that's the same thing with assistance animals. We had a case one time. I used this same case over and over. Some of you probably heard it. We had a case, it was a group home, and it was, I didn't get to go there, the investigator went, but it sounded like an interesting place. They had this big room that was the common room, the living room. And then around it in a circle were a bunch of individual apartments. Each had its own little bathroom, but in this common area was the kitchen, the microwave, the TV, tables, and such. I had a little girl. Her mama wanted her to come and be part of this group home. She had some type of disability, mental, and she had need for an assistance animal. Well, the group home said, you know, they did what you would have done, Julie. They took the request and verified that the person had a disability, verified the need for the animal. But then there was another little girl at this group home that had some type of disability, mental health disability. She had this unbelievable fear of animals, especially dogs. And she'd been there a lot longer. She'd been there for a while. So the group home had to balance, and this is what's done under the reasonable accommodation provision. The group home had to balance this little girl's interest in bringing her dog there with another little girl's interest in not having a dog there. And the group home said, after doing our research and study and talking to the various doctors, we can't allow this little girl with the dog to come. We investigated. We found no cause. So it's not automatic. It's pretty automatic, but not always automatic. We've had a couple of cases where we had a couple of cases where the landlord claimed an allergy. And in one case in particular, he said, I go to this 10-plex building almost every day. I have to work there. And whenever there's a dog there or leaves, I get all sick and stuff. Well, we investigated. First of all, we couldn't verify that he got all sick and stuff. He'd never been diagnosed, never seen a doctor for it. We found out that he does something. What did he do? Woodworking or something. And sometimes he'd wear a mask, sometimes he wouldn't wear a mask. And then we found out he's rarely at this 10-plex. He has a manager that goes. So we found probable cause on that. This is pretty good coffee. All right. Is that enough for us? Yes, sir.
The guy with the ferret at Menards, I assume the ferret probably runs around
Oh, he was all over the cart.
He probably runs around the unit, the living unit. Can you enforce rules that the animal has to be in a kennel when the owner is not at home?
I think so. But think about a ferret. Who has ever had a ferret? Anybody had a ferret? Now, I have this bias against ferrets. I can't imagine a ferret serving any useful purpose, has it?
No.
It's just so, I heard it was just so territorial. I mean, it's so territorial that if it once drinks out of a cup, nobody can ever touch the cup. That's what I've heard. Okay, back to your question now. I think you can, especially if you have good reason to believe that the animal either is going to cause trouble or will cause trouble, or you've got a complaint about trouble.
Generally, they don't have one. They get one, and then they need another one for companion for the first one.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you might have about 3 of them.
Oh, that's terrible.
I don't know. You know, we've had so many, and see, you, Gerald, are between a rock and a hard place, because I have total access to all information. You've got limited access. You can get a statement from the doc saying, yes, she has a disability. Yes, she needs the ferret. The ferret provides companionship. That's pretty much all you get. Me, I get the info from the doc. I get the medical records. I get to interview the doc. You don't know how many times, I shouldn't say this probably, you don't know how many times we've interviewed the doc and the doc said, she had a dog? Really? I think a dog would be helpful, but the doc had never seen the dog, had never seen his patient interact with the dog. See, I get all that, Because I have to determine now not only whether she has a disability, but I have to determine whether this animal is really needed. Whether this animal actually does something for this person. Without this animal, this person can't live in your unit. I have to examine to see if there's that nexus between the animal, the disability, whether the animal's needed really.
Well, ferrets, a lot of times, they think they're so small.
We shouldn't be talking about ferrets. I shouldn't have brought it up.
They bring them in after they get them after they've rented the place. And then once you got a cage there and you got an animal there you never knew about.
Don, could you?
I'd have a problem with that if I were the housing provider. What is that for? First her, then you.
I was just gonna say, on our medical forms, we have the residents indicate to the doctor.
Say that again.
The medical forms that we have them get the doctor note that we have our residents fill out. On the bottom it says, would you be willing to testify in a court of law on this? Or something like that, I can't remember how it reads.
Yeah.
So that if it's, the doctor is just being nice, a lot of times they won't sign it because they're going, well, I don't want to go to court and testify that they really need this animal, for just for depression. So that helps a lot with the fault ones, the ones that are not real.
Now, if the animal is indeed an assistance animal, and the animal is behaved, and this tenant is otherwise good, I mean, you want money. You want money for the rent. You want someone who pays on time, who doesn't bother other people. You may not like the assistance animal, the idea of having an animal up there to no pets, but you might have a dandy tenant here. I mean, it's... Yes, sir, Rex.
I just want to clarify one more time the difference between a service animal and a companion animal. Did you ultimately say they fall into the same category, or they are definitely different?
Under the ADA, it's got to be a service animal. It's got to be individually trained. Could be trained by the master. Could be trained by some agency. Cats and paws for us, whatever. And it has to be trained, not just a disciplinarian, to sit when asked to sit. It has to be trained to do something. It has to be trained to jump up and push that button to automatically open that door. It has to be trained to sense that I'm about to stumble, I'm going to get dizzy, and I'm going to fall down, so the animal has to get up next to me and give me support. It has to be trained to do something like that, a task. That's the ADA. But for you, it can be an animal that the doc thinks provides this emotional support. This person has just himself, and he can't think of anything else, and he can't focus on other things, and he gets so lonely and depressed that he needs this animal to interact with. He needs this animal so that he can feed him in the morning, so he can take him out. There needs to be that connection. Otherwise, this kid will do this or that. Well, I'm not sure. I'm making this stuff up. But that's the kind of... And it's more than just a pet. Go ahead.
So that can't be called a service animal because of that.
Well, see, the fair house...
It's just there as a warm...
Yeah, but don't get caught too much up in definitions, because remember, under the fair housing law, there's no definition for service animal. There's no definition for assistance animal. Remember, it all comes in under that duty to make reasonable accommodation. So HUD saw no reason to define the animal the way Justice has for the ADA. So you've got no definition to work with. The common definition, I think, in the industry is assistance animals, because an assistance animal includes those animals that are trained to do tasks. It includes the companion. It includes the therapy animals. Now, let me ask you this. You've asked a lot of questions. Let me ask you one, and you answer. How come... Assuming that I have a disability and I have a need for this animal, how come I can have, God, I hate ferrets, but assume, why can't I take my ferret in my dwelling in his unit? Why must he make reasonable accommodation for me and my ferret when McDonald's doesn't have to, when Menards doesn't have to? Now, it makes sense. We've got 2 federal laws. Why is it so liberal with housing? Because Congress hates housing providers? No. But why? Why? Well, maybe. No. Why is there a difference? Tell me.
Probably because it's their home, it's where they want to live, and they're at majority of the time, especially when it comes to people who have a lot of problems.
And innocent people don't have to interact with this ferret. It's just relatives and friends, people I invite over. If Gary doesn't want to come over and see me and my ferret, he didn't have to. I had to interact with that damn ferret at Menards. Shouldn't have to do that.
You must have missed a good story.
But see, if I had more guts, I would have told him. I would have grabbed him by the collar and walked him up to the counter, and then Menards would have sued me because I just kept my mouth shut and got away from him. Yes?
I have a tenant with 2 little girls, came to an apartment one day for another reason and saw 2 cats there. I said, well, wait a minute, can't have cats, you didn't pay the deposit, you're not paying the pet fee. Well, they're my boyfriend's, he's surprising his daughters with them this weekend. Well, of course, next week.
So they're like visitors?
Yeah, visitors. When I said, well, you can't have visitors, you cannot have pets in this apartment without the pet deposit. So I either need the pet deposit or the cat's gone. Well, the next week, she comes, gives me the prescription from the doctor that her children need this because they have post-traumatic stress, probably because she's the mother. I know that's why, because she's taught them to lie when she sees me in the parking lot for kids. So she's got this note, and so I said, fine. I just walked away. But I probably could have pushed for a little bit more. I mean, does that therapist need to see the kids with the cats? I'm not going anywhere. You know what? Those kids probably need the cats. I don't want them in there, but I feel sorry for living with this mother. So.
Now, the kids live there. They're part of the household. Yeah. See, when I was talking about the doc and whether the doc had ever seen the animal with the person, that's kind of just for me. I mean, it's not an absolute requirement, but it tells me so much. I mean, Dr. Joe, you wrote the script and you've never seen the dog. You can't even remember if your patient had a dog. Why did you write this script?
Because the tenant asked.
That's right. That's right. But I ain't saying that you can say that. You can look at this note and say, well, it doesn't verify the fact that your kid has a disability, and it doesn't really tell me how this animal allows your kid to remain in this apartment. I need a nexus. I need to know a little bit about what this animal does. Now, you're not entitled to all the specifics. I mean, you can't find out what the disability is, but you find out a little bit.
But it needs to be, are you saying that for this person to function, they need this animal? Is that kind of...
Yeah, I think so. In order to, the law is under that, when you look at that reasonable accommodation provision, the law says you have to make the accommodation for a person with a disability who needs the accommodation in order to fully use and enjoy the dwelling. Without a disability, I can use my dwelling, your unit. I can watch TV, I can go and come when I want, I can have visitors over. But if I had a disability and I can't do that, I can't get out without this animal gives me this courage to get out, meet people, I'm not fully enjoying that unit as your other tenants. Yes, sir.
Does GINA apply only to employment law, or would it apply in housing law?
Man, I don't know. I know it's a federal anti-discrimination employment statute that EEOC enforces. I haven't seen anything where, I mean, generally a housing provider doesn't get those kinds of records, See, the reason GINA is a problem is because, as an employer, Gary, you say, Don, you're qualified, you can work here. So you give me a conditional offer of employment. Good. Once he gives me that conditional offer, he can get all kinds of stuff about me. He can ask my doc, you can make me go through a medical exam. You can ask my doc for all kinds of info. You can get some of that DNA junk, and you can find out if I have a propensity for some type of disease, which is going to up your insurance cost. You see that in employment, I guess. You do. But you're not going to do that. Housing providers, I mean, there just hasn't been that need for that law. I don't think there's any Right now, there's no law on the books that I know of. Go ahead.
Well, I guess the context of my question was, in employment, I have a gene of warning on my thing I send to the doctor, say, don't give me any genetic information.
Yes.
Would I want to do the same thing if I'm asking for a note from a doctor about the tenant's need for an animal?
Well, you got to be careful when you ask for that note. If that tenant, if I say, yeah, you can go ahead and contact my doc, or you can send a letter to my doc, if I give you the permission to do that, you've got to be circumspect here. You know you ain't entitled to know what my disability is.
Right.
You ain't entitled to know my medical history. You ain't entitled to know how my disability manifests itself, whether I have seizures, whether I have, what's it called, Tourette's. You're not entitled to that. You're only entitled to two things, very minimal, and that is whether the doc will verify that I do indeed have a disability under the law. I mean, you could put in your note, does he have an impairment? Does it substantially limit a major life activity? What life activity? You're entitled to that. You're entitled to know he claims to have an assistance animal. I need to know, does he need this assistance animal? And can you tell me a little bit about the animal, what the animal does for him? That's it. That's all you're entitled to. So you have to be circumspect when you send that letter. If you get the authorization for me to contact my doc, you better be careful then.
So,
You.
we can't ask them to sign, providing we're in the boundaries of those allowable questions. Does he have an impairment? Does an
I
impairment?
think so. I mean, that's what the definition of disability is, yes.
So he's signing a release that the doctor can give you the information.
Yeah, I think you could do it that way. Because remember, when I come to you with this request, you're not going to say, Julie, yes or no right away. If you don't know me from Adam, you're going to consider what I have to say, what info I have. You're going to tell me, I know I have a duty to make reasonable accommodation. I intend to do that. But I need to do a little bit of investigation. I will get back to you in a very timely manner. And then you go through your thought process. You don't have to make a knee-jerk. See, that's what happens when we do testing. We call Julie, and she gives me a knee-jerk reaction, and we file a commissioner complaint against her. No! Did you not read the ad, Julie says? It says no pets. But it's a companion. It's a service animal. And Julie said, read the ad one more time. Goodbye. All Julie would have had to have said was, you know what? You know what? I'm going to consider that. But I need some info from you. Send this to me. I don't know who's next. I'm going to go to you because you've never asked.
Dave was over here to the left.
Single family then too, or is that?
Say that again.
Is it single family homes as well as, or is it only, multiple?
It's everything. Let me talk about one. This is a good question though. In the Iowa Civil Rights Act, state law, if, let's say you own your house, and you and your partner decide to move down by Rock Creek or somewhere, and you want to rent out, this is your only property, other property, your old house, the one you raised your children in. You're covered by the Iowa Civil Rights Act, even if it's just one unit, one single-family house. Now, under Title VIII, if all you had is this single-family house, you wouldn't be covered under Title VIII. We would take the complaint, but we wouldn't cross-file it with HUD. Because under Title VIII, you'd have to own 4 or more single-family houses. For some reason, under federal law, it's a big deal about single-family house versus an apartment. Under Title VIII, the federal law, let's say you own the hardware store in some small town on the square, and you had just one apartment upstairs. Even though it's just one unit, you'd still be covered under Title VIII. Whereas if you own this great big single-family house out in the country and that's all you had, you wouldn't be covered under Title VIII. But regardless, we got you.
Donna, will you do a quick review on deposits related to service animals and also who pays for accommodations such as installing a wheelchair ramp, removing it after the tenant's gone, and similar items?
Let's do the bigger question first, which is your second. Under the law, there's a duty on your part to allow reasonable modifications. That's in one section. In another section, there's a duty on your part to make reasonable accommodation. One talks modification, one talks accommodation. Modification, you have to allow a reasonable modification. Modification is structural stuff. Physical changes to the apartment, the ramp, the grab bars, widening of the doors, change in the fire alarm from sight to sound or vice versa. Those are modifications. The tenant comes to you and says, I need this change in my apartment. Take those cupboards out from under the sink so I can get my wheelchair up there so I have better access to the handles. That's a modification. Your response, Polly, is, maybe, let me consider that. I know I have a duty to allow reasonable modifications. If there's no reason not to do it, if you don't have a good reason not to do it, then you're going to say, okay, you can do it, but you pay for it, tenant. The tenant pays for those modifications. Not only do you pay for it, tenant, you got to tell me who's going to do it for you. And I need to know if this is a reputable company or not. And I need you to put it back in the position it was in when you move out. You've got to agree to that too. So modification, it's up to the tenant to pay. Accommodation, that's all about you folks. Because an accommodation is, the question to you is whether you will adjust your policy, make an exception to your practice in order to accommodate the person with a disability. And generally, making that exception, doing that waiver, usually that didn't cost you any money. It's just a administration, tracking, monitoring, convenience type of issue. Yes, sir?
Can I change the subject just a second?
Well, I don't know. David, can we change the subject?
A little more on the pet deposit.
Oh, I forgot about that. Remember, he had a two-part question. Well, once you're satisfied the person has a disability, once you're satisfied there's a connect between the animal and the disability, you've got that health care provider statement, then pretty much it's all downhill then, or all uphill, depending on your perspective. Because if you have a no pets building and you're going to have to allow the animal in, if you have a building that allows pets but you charge a pet fee or a pet deposit, all of a sudden now you don't have a pet. I got no pet. It's an assistance animal. So the policy about pet fee, pet deposit, you can't put it on me. Because remember this, Steve, remember this. Sarah comes in, she has no disability. She has no need for an animal. She doesn't have to pay a pet fee, does she? Sarah comes in with an animal by her own choice. She knew you had a pet fee. But she says, I don't care, I'm bringing my animal in. I can afford that $25 a month. I'd rather spend the $25 on my cat than a movie. But Sarah makes the choice. Me, on the other hand, with a disability who has need for an assistance animal who can't fully enjoy and utilize my dwelling, I got no choice. I got no choice. So for you to then insist that I pay the pet fee or pet deposit, that is discrimination, terms and conditions of employment based on disability, because I got no choice. I got to have this animal. Yes, you. No, you haven't asked a question, have you?
I have not. Following up on Dave's, you mentioned, I believe, modification. If somebody comes and says, well, I need 6 doors widened, can you allow them to widen 6 doors in a house?
You wouldn't want my brother to do it.
Can you say, no, doors aren't going to be torn out and widened?
Well, you got to have a good reason. I mean,
Well, we got a wheelchair.
okay, well, he has a good reason, but you have to have a good reason for not allowing it. What are you worried about? That the house will fall
Do you
down?
have any idea how much damage is to tear out a door and make it 6 inches wider?
That's a lot of damage.
Yeah, I know.
But there are companies that can do that. Your construction company could do it.
And then they got to tear it out and put it back 6 inches when he moves out?
What tenant would want to do that?
I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
They're going to agree to it and then disappear.
Well, you can ask for a bond, can't you?
They don't have any money left when they
You can ask for that bond, can't you? Sure you
Bond
can.
or a security deposit?
I don't know, whatever you call it. But you can ask for that money up front that you can use to put it back the way it was.
But the law says you can only collect 2 months deposit.
Say that again?
The law says you can only collect a double.
No, 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 but under the law, there's provision in the law when it's something, when it's
Wouldn't that
something.
conflict with the state law?
No, no.
You wouldn't.
No, I think, I am positive. I mean, I never run up against this, but I know there's regulations. I know there's HUD rules out there, and the statute talks about a bond. It talks about you want to make such a big structural thing. Not only do I get assurance as the landlord that you'll put it back the way it was, but I get some money up front to make sure it happens when you leave. I think that's all covered. That's all in there.
Can you get money up front to make the repairs for them when they come in then?
It depends on how you and the tenant work this. I mean, you make it clear to the tenant that he's got to pay. But you can say, Gary, you know what? I know a good construction company that can do this. In fact, my nephew can do it. Rex says, I don't care, put the ramp in as long as it's good. I'll pay you for that. Work out the deal. It's all about reasonable accommodation. It's all about reasonable. It's about balancing your interest with the tenant's interest. It's not that the tenant gets to win all the time. It's just that if you decide, well, yeah. Well, not if you look at our numbers. I mean, our numbers, we have a typical year, 150 cases, maybe 50 or 60 get settled up front. Out of the remaining, I think last year we had 12 or 15 probable cause cases and about 30, 40, 50 no probable cause cases. So the PC rate, 10, 15%. Settlement rate's good because the parties are agreeable on trying to work things out at the get-go. Now, what was we talking about, Gary?
Well, we were talking about requiring the tenant to put the money up front if we have to make major changes in our property.
Yeah, I think that's something that you two work out. And then if Rex calls me up and says, you know what, we had a deal and then Gary reneged. Well, I'm going to ask him, what was the deal? Why did he renege? You know, I mean, we're going to look at both sides and try to figure out. You're just not going to be able to say, Cheryl, no, you ain't putting a ramp in. How come I can't have a ramp in? Because I said you can't have a ramp in. You know, you and remember too, when it comes to this undue hardship thing, if you were in court, you'd have to prove it up. It's an affirmative defense. So if I'm the tenant and I have the disability, I have the need for the accommodation, I make the request and you deny it, and I show, at least on a very superficial basis, that it's reasonable and it wouldn't cost you that much, I win in court unless you prove up undue hardship. You're going to have to prove up, here's why you didn't do it, here's what the cost would be, here's how it would hurt my business, here's how it would affect other people's interest, other tenants, and why I couldn't do it. But it's a defense that you have to prove up. Yes?
Well, this is a change of subject.
I think it's time, because we haven't covered the other two.
You know,
Got 2 more minutes.
when we have a tenant coming, I don't think you would give us any problems if we said we wouldn't rent to somebody because they didn't have a bring home income of 3 times the rent. I think that's reasonable.
As long as you come up with something and you're consistent about it.
What would be the situation on, you know, I get people that are marginally required, you know, like 6 months on the job, I don't feel that's adequate time, or 6 months with a landlord, I don't feel that's adequate time. What would be kind of a reasonable rule of thumb with you people on?
Oh, we don't do that. We take great pride in not, and this, don't laugh. There's some of you that's going to laugh. But we take great pride, Iowa Civil Rights Commission, in not telling you how to do your job. We don't. I mean, if you decide to have background checks, if you decide to use Iowa Courts Online or some other company, if you decide to have a credit rating of so much, if you decide that you need 2 positive, I mean, those kinds of things. If you decide that your prospective tenant has to be wearing a Yankee hat when she walks into the, that's fine. I don't care.
As long as you're consistent.
That's it. That's it.
Well, okay, so you're consistent, but there's good tenants coming to you out there that have strong jobs, maybe even as like 10 years on the job, but they have no landlord experience. Now, I wouldn't turn that person down necessarily if they were mature, if they can give me a reason why they don't have a landlord that I buy, you know, and then anything I do, I verify everything.
It's,
So, I mean, so if I take one tenant who has no landlord experience, but they got 10 years on the job, and you know, they got a good credit, let's say, then that's still being consistent then.
yes, yes, because remember, discrimination in refusal to rent, not renew, termination, cancellation, it's about intentional discrimination. So the tenant is alleging that you considered his race when you made the decision not to renew, that you had this race evil brain cell, and that cell caused you not to renew. It's intentional discrimination. It's not that you made a mistake. I mean, it's intentional. So as an investigator, when I come in, I'm going to say, how come you canceled his lease? And you gave me reason A, B, and C. And I'm going to ask for documentation. I'm going to ask for your witnesses. And let's say that I find your reasons A, B, and C are valid, they're legitimate, they're true, he did those things bad, and that's, so it all is supported. No, I'm not done. So then, once I know your reason, and it's documented, and I know that he did the bad deeds, and it's a race case, he's African American, then what I do is I look for white tenants who have done the same things, or something just as bad. And I'm looking to see if you treated them as harshly. So it's about...
One more short question.
Okay, so but it's about intentional discrimination. I mean, you're not going to get in trouble because you made a mistake, you goofed up. You're only going to get in trouble with us if you discriminate, if you intended to discriminate. And that's what our investigation's about, trying to determine whether you have that evil brain cell. Okay, one more question.
Something that would be very helpful, I think, to all of us. I would argue that we as landlords are very much interested in knowing and understanding the laws, the rules, everything, and trying to abide by them. And I think something that would be very helpful to us would be if you could provide us a document that basically outlines what we can reasonably request of a medical professional or a social worker that says that these people are in fact needing a companion animal. How do we justify that legally and acceptably in your eyes? Is that something you can provide?
So you want from us maybe
a form,
a template letter that you
Yes.
can send to the good doc, or you can give to the tenant to say, yeah, I think I can work on that. I think I can come up with something. Do this for me. You send me what you've got by email, and I'll run it by me, I'll run it by others, and I'll run it by our legal. And then once I get it, how will I tell you? Send me.
Give it to Andrew and he will disseminate it.
Yeah.
You can put it on the website, under forms.
You got to. No, I'm not going to. No, I'm going to forget all of this when I get back to the office.
Right?
Yes, I am. But unless she does the first step, then so if it falls down and
Honestly, it ought to be on your website.
there's a lot of stuff on our website that has this in it. I mean, I'm going to look at other documents. You look at that comparative study; it'll talk about it. The forms and stuff will have it. There's a lot of stuff already on the website, but I don't think we offer on the website housing providers. Here's the letter to the doc. Particularly, we don't. I mean, but we have enough info that tells you what you can get, and I've told you what you can get. But I don't think it's a bad idea to have this template letter. That way I can run it by our... All right.
Okay, thank you, Don. I appreciate that. Let's give Don a